Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special episode of the 312 Podcast. We are bringing it to you on the road. We are bringing this episode to you remotely from our Greenville, South Carolina office. Now, in my short time visiting here, if I've learned anything, it's that these folks are super busy. Luckily, I was able to sit down with COO and President Tad Goetcheus, as well as Regional Office Manager for the Southeast region, Shaun, and talk about the history of the Greenville office, the work we do, and get a really great sense of the people and the office here. I hope you'll take the time to join me for this episode and get to know a little bit more about this great office and the amazing people that work in it. I'll take you now to Tad and Shaun.
My name is Tad Goetcheus. I'm currently the President and Chief Operating Officer for HRP Associates, and I sit and reside in our Greenville, South Carolina office, but I do travel to all of our offices on a frequent basis. I got my start right out of college. This was my first job where I was a project engineer and worked on some entry-level projects and in 1988. And I got promoted after a year and a half and became a senior project engineer. And another year and a half later, I became a project manager. And I must note, I think I'm still the youngest project manager in the history of the company. But it was fun. And the reason why I say that is the opportunity of HRP. People just give you a chance to run with it. And I had great mentors, and we were really busy and expanding. And it was a fantastic opportunity. 4.5 years into it, the opportunity came up in 1993 and said, hey, would you like to move down south and give it a try and give it your all? They supported me, and we came out with a decent plan about where we wanted to grow. But I also had an open field to go ahead and pursue what I wanted to do. It's like, do the things you want to do best and try a lot of things. And I said, look, I'm going to enjoy the heck out of it. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to see the area. And I just got really intrigued by the industry. And so from 93 to about 2000, I was a regional manager and then became a vice president. And then in 2019, we had, kind of morphed into the role with the most recent transition to chief operating officer and president of the company. So it's nice seeing it soup to nuts because I like to still work hand in hand with folks every day. And I could actually relate to some of the projects they work through and the experiences and struggles.
My name's Shaun Malin. I'm a professional geologist, and I am a regional manager at HRP and a principal. And when I started at HRP, my title was project manager, and I actually had hair.
It's funny, too, as far as the growth of the company, and you could talk about this, Shaun.
It's opposite of the growth of my hair.
Yes, exactly. When you came, you had your PG before you came, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was probably South Carolina. I got my PE in South Carolina, but because we work all over,
right,
we both have like greater than 10 states of where we're licensed because we're just doing cool projects all over. A lot easier doing that when you're an engineer, not so much when you're a geologist. Pennsylvania and Texas, wow.
Yeah.
There's a reason why they do the oil and gas and exploration. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on underneath the ground there, and you need people to know what they're doing.
Yeah, you got to understand the nuances of different states. And even though there's usually a regulatory roadmap of some sort, there's definitely nuances from state to state on how certain agencies want things done. And you gotta grab a consultant that they, even if they don't know it off the cuff, they know where to go get that information, or they know who to team with to get that.
So, Tad, going all the way back to the beginning, tell us about the creation of the South Carolina office.
Yeah, so the whole idea around the South Carolina office started coming about in the early 1990s. A lot of companies were transitioning at the time from the north to the south. Not only was manufacturing expanding, but it seemed like a good marketplace for professional services of all trades and such. We started thinking about it in the early 90s, and then in 93, we actually formed a joint venture called HRP Spectrum and made it all happen June 28th of 1993. And really the whole premise was to continue what we're doing, environmental health and safety services with some civil engineering. So we mirrored really what the parent company was doing out of Connecticut, and branching out to all regions of the South, but mainly South Carolina and North Carolina. For a while, we thought about opening up an office in North Carolina because that was a very tech-savvy center and area, but we settled on South Carolina because, once again, of the position between Charlotte and Atlanta, but also we had a lot of partnerships. So transportation-wise and effectiveness-wise, the geography just worked out great. And honestly, we couldn't have hit a better spot, to be honest, where we ended up.
So, Tad, generally speaking, what was the day-to-day like in those earlier times?
Well, one thing, it was, so back in the day, 93, I was down here as the regional manager to start up the office, and I had a direct mentorship with Mark Posidento. The P of HRP was actually my mentor or main higher level authority that worked with the business on me and started off the premise. And as he transitioned out of the company, Walt Gankars, who was basically the second transition CEO, we worked heavily together on a lot of civil engineering projects and environmental health and safety, and soon became very successful with a lot of our federal and military work with the U.S. Navy down in Charleston, or they call it Southern Division or South Div, because we were very successful working together at the Northern Division office up in Philly. So that was one of our main targets. And a lot of the industry that we worked with in the Northeast had opened up operations as well.
So in your time in this office, how have you seen things transition and change from those early days?
As large as this country is, there is a difference in geographics. A lot of people will make the reference of the Mason-Dixon line and things like that, but the plants in the South are much, much larger. There's a lot more, I guess, what we consider to be heavy industry. And there was a lot of chemical manufacturing. There's a lot of textile manufacturing, and now it's transitioned to automotive and aerospace, because as textiles and a lot of the jobs left the South and either moved to Mexico or Asia, was really the reason why we moved down south ourselves. There was another period of transition. So I was used to my first 5 years of my career working at plants that were 200 people, 250. Now you're talking about plants that were 4,000 people, not as many unions. So that was a different way that your business was represented, and a lot of greenfield sites. So industrial revolution up in the Northeast, a lot of contaminated properties, a lot of history, just the way you went about your business and doing the projects. But now you had a clear open land where projects were more, I want to say, soup to nuts, where you got involved with property transactions through all the initial permitting and the design and things of that nature, right up onto the employee assistance, and just massive size plants, and really industry that we had never seen before. So that was really exciting, and we were able to grow with some transitions from our other offices, and then local hiring with that as well, and working with the economic development sources and university groups to grow our business.
So around what time would you locate that big change that had happened in the Southeast, and how would you say that affected our business?
Once again, I guess what better to be lucky, but really when HRP came down in 93, that was when they had finished and completed the construction of the BMW plant. So the BMW plant's about 5-10 miles outside of the Greenville base, located between Greenville and Spartanburg. But with that, when they established, that was where BMW from Germany said, we want to be in the United States, and it's the only plant in the United States. But what comes along with that is about 125 suppliers. So when they exploded, it just so happened when we were here. But with that, Michelin's North American headquarters is here. You have a lot of foreign headquarters here, a lot of big plants that are out here. So it really, I'm going to say not necessarily exploded, but transitioned because textile market had fallen, had come on the wayside. There's a lot of old brownfields from mills that just didn't make it when they went overseas. So that was when they made their transition, was about the time when we started. So a lot was going on. So it was a good time.
Now, Shaun, take us to where you kind of started at HRP and give us a little background about where you came from and how you got to where you are.
Oh, man. Well, I came over to HRP in October of 2010. We had just come down, or we were still kind of finishing up the recession, right, from the meltdown. I guess the one thing that I remember coming from some other firms, HRP wasn't my first job out of school, but I just remember the pace of play. Lots of fast moving projects. Deadlines seemed to be a lot sharper. A lot more diverse client base, and so it was a pretty big transition for me coming over and managing projects at that level at the time, and meeting Tad here and trying to understand what his vision was for the office, and trying to understand the other offices within the network of HRP and the similarities and the differences. So I don't know, Tad, how long did it take me to adjust? Probably like a good 2 years for me to kind of settle in and feel comfortable that I knew what was going on and getting everything managed. And I also kind of came in without really a team. And I don't mean, peer groups and people helping us out and stuff, but I also kind of came in and took on a lot of the geology, a lot of the remediation projects, which Tad's crew had been working on previously, and just starting to kind of beef up and build up that side of the house.
Yeah. One thing I'll say is the way it all transitioned. I mentioned before Greenfield's projects, from 93 to about 2000, 2001, we worked on federal contracts, and they were with Navy bases all over the Southeast. One or two were in South Carolina, but they were more on the coast in Charleston. But we were very heavily EHS or compliance based. We had that side of the house, the health and safety, the environmental permits, air permits. Because industry was growing, everybody needed an air permit, new process, bigger plants, things like this. But I mentioned greenfields. Nobody redeveloped sites. They could always buy a new patch of land, economic incentives and things like that. So when Shaun came on, what was happening is what people were failing to clean up sites. It's not that they didn't have the technology. It's not like they didn't have the regulatory base to do it. People just steered away from those projects. And as the economy changed and they started doing that, it really was a great marriage with Shaun because he had such a depth of knowledge in being a local talent from Clemson and having his master's in all the different solvent contaminations and all the great things that DNAPL and all these other words we can talk about, but they needed to be solved. And it's a different geology than we have in the Northeast, and it's a different geology than the Midwest. And, it was a really natural fit for him to do that and take over all those range. And mainly it was because of where the economy was going. They finally realized that, land was starting to get a little bit smaller, but it was more because of transportation and infrastructure. You had to build a plant that was 100 miles out, but there was no way to get there. So they had to build closer. So Shaun jumped into that, thankfully.
And happily.
So, Shaun, how would you define the work that the Greenville office primarily does today?
So in Greenville, we're very balanced. And what I mean by that is I believe that a majority, if not all of the business sectors, if you had to do broad brushes, right, within the environmental arena, we have a very strong EH&S practice, as Tad discussed. It's been around for a long time. Our brownfield remediation practice has grown over the last 10 years or so, and we've also kind of developed some other services within that. We have a very budding and robust process safety management, OSHA type consultation services. So, that's kind of on a course level, that's kind of the breakdown with what we do. Obviously, within different departments, you can slice it different ways. We have, again, a very talented and nimble environmental due diligence, or I say merger and acquisition group that, parachutes into 6 states across the country when a company that we're working for is either buying another entity or perhaps they're selling. And throughout those all different divisions, you look at our client base, we have quite a diverse clientele from industries, from manufacturing to commercial base to attorneys to government work. We're really quite diversified.
I'd say, Shaun, you made a great point there about a lot of times the work in the Southeast is very regionalized, which is different than the Northeast and other parts of the country where our offices are. You'll find out that someone has one location in South Carolina, but there'll be 2 in Tennessee. I got a plant in North Carolina, 1 in Georgia, and they will want us at all those locations. And before long, you're saying, okay, I'm running down to Alabama on a routine basis, or, touching Mississippi, and North Carolina is really a regular route for us, as well as Tennessee. So you also, you developed a core bit of work in a 6-hour radius. And that became just really, I always use the phrase, that was Tuesday for us, because there's so many plants, and a lot of people seem to have the business structure of 5 or 6 plants as far as their pods. And of course, there's larger companies there too. And it's been nice because we've been able to grow along with that.
Building upon that geography you were talking about, again, that was another transition for me, Tom, is coming in mainly working in a region or a specific region, in the upstate of South Carolina, and then getting into projects with HRP where, I was in Raleigh one day, and later that week I was, on my way to Texas, just because that's where the clientele takes us. And when you have a diverse client base, or you're doing merger and acquisition work, or you have a client that's got a plant in Pensacola, in Texas, in Bristol, Tennessee, you just have to be ready to roll and travel. And so, that was it's interesting. It keeps you on your toes, and a lot of travel.
What's interesting too is, most of our work is actually probably done with teams, a minimal of at least 2 people. And, sometimes you travel by yourself or bigger groups. But because of the travel, you end up probably having a closer bond, and you kind of grow both internally, professional. There's a lot of windshield time Shaun will talk about, where you can develop mentorships and relationships with your staff. But you can also enjoy an assignment on the coast of South Carolina and say, hey, while we're here, let's enjoy the culture. Or we're going to go to Tennessee. Let's catch some of the music in Nashville when we're working a 12-hour day in the locale. And it's been kind of neat because you really learn about the country and each other. And it really has, I think, really helped our bond of our offices in the South to do that. It's been a lot of fun.
Transition from talking less about the office and kind of more about the big projects that have come through here. I'd be interested in hearing from both of you about some of the landmark projects, or maybe more accurately stated, the landmark services that a Greenville, South Carolina office has serviced as projects throughout its history. Some of the ones that have really made the big impact on the growth of this office, kind of from its inception to now. Tad, would you be able to start us off there?
I mean, landmark projects that helped the growth, in the late 90s was with the Southern Division. We did up to 15 bases throughout the Southeast. That was a large growth spurt for not only our employee and staff, but our geographical coverage and the type of work that we did, with that being essentially pollution prevention and hazardous waste cleanup type of work. We did a lot of industry work. We really were industry focused. The lumber industry, the paper and textile industry, with some very large plants in some remote locations. Appliance manufacturing, water heaters, refrigerators, washers and dryers, some large type items that we did, chemical manufacturers that were out there, and then a lot of plastic and injection molding. Well, that coincidentally, if you think real hard about where we are with the automotive reasons, anybody that made a car part and attached it onto the direct car part, we've never really done, up until recently, a direct work for the automakers, but we worked for pretty much all their suppliers that put things on a car. So if they attach it or glue it or screw it down, we've probably done some environmental work to help them out there, as far as that's come about. One of the big landmark projects that we also done, which was based out of our South Carolina office, came about in 2007 when we had a unique program, which is termed our College Peer Audit Program. We used the EPA self-audit bill to work with over 110 colleges in Region 4. And we had a big signing ceremony, and the states of South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama, Florida, North Carolina were all on that. And, lo and behold, we're in front of the EPA regional commissioner for a program we created that says we're going to assess what we do. We're going to train people to do the right thing and do corrective actions and right the ship and do management programs. And before you knew it, we went from Region 4, which is based in Atlanta, and that grew to Region 5, Indiana, Michigan, to Region 6, which was Texas and Arkansas, and then also Region 7, which was Kansas. You blinked your eyes, and now we had 300 private colleges and universities, and it grew to also public colleges, research institutions, research hospitals, as well as community colleges. So soup to nuts in the higher ed, we probably have the most experience out of any consultant firm in the country, and I probably would be willing to wrestle anybody for that, to say that we have that. And we continue to work with them today. The joke we always make, we trained a lot of folks, gave them our emails back in 2007. 14 years later, they keep on emailing. So there's a lot in the inbox. But we've done a lot of outreach program for them, and most recently we continued that growth into health and safety above environmental compliance, but we did a lot of COVID planning for them too as well, helping out how to manage the tough situation and to kind of business continuity. So that was very landmark for us. Simultaneously to that, we went back into the heavy industry and we got a niche market. ExxonMobil had a new product that was coming out, and it was to support Title VI of the Clean Air Act, which back in the day, anybody in the 70s, when parents talked about you couldn't use hairspray because it was killing the ozone and things like that, or deodorant spray, that was the rule. The Toyota protocols and the Montreal protocols was Title VI of the Clean Air Act that says you're killing the ozone and global warming chemicals. So Exxon had a solution. They brought in some new chemical products that had to do with blowing agents with foam manufacturing, and before we knew it, we worked and modified over 35 plants in 4 countries, and these were massive plants where we did hardcore process safety management training, and that just dragged us probably to 18 different states. We did projects in Malaysia, we did a project in Germany, so we really got involved, and once again, another chunk of growth. So we were always growing by 10, 15% as we hit this marketplace, and that was on the EHS side.
Tad, what's process safety management for the non-engineer?
Yeah, well, very good question. So process safety management, I always term it as the granddaddy of all OSHA regulations, and it deals with risk management planning when they had an accident. It has to do with either a toxic chemical on a list or a highly flammable chemical. When you have a certain threshold chemical, you need to have safety procedures in place. A lot of times it means you need to have electrical classified areas, proper ventilation, proper warning systems, alarm systems, and things like that to not only protect the workers, but to protect the operations and the community outside too as well. So it is a very high level of regulation. It's a triple level threat of protection. I wouldn't call it on the nuclear scale, but it's got the same premise as a nuclear scale, and any of the big industries go by this premise of risk management training. So good question, Shaun.
And now, Shaun, what is your perspective on those landmark projects for the Greenville office?
Landmark projects on the hydrogeo side of the house. I think that VOCs, volatile organic compounds, solvents, continue to be the soup du jour, I guess, for a lot of manufacturing clientele, or specifically properties that have been in operation since the 60s and 70s. There's still a fair amount of those around, and we continue to work on those fronts. We also do a fair bit of petroleum, whether it's a state lead. We do a lot of petroleum work in South Carolina. We do a lot of petroleum work in Texas. I guess off the top of my head, we have some tough chlorinated solvent plumes that are underneath buildings that are occupied. So that has a certain level of challenges. We've been working a PCB remediation site in Tennessee for quite a number of years there, trying to get it redeveloped. We're kind of starting to dip our toe into the PFAS realm here. Certainly in our northeastern offices, where the regulators have gotten ahead of the EPA on that front, but we're definitely starting to talk to clientele about what kind of challenges that emerging criteria, that emerging contaminant is going to bring to the table. So pretty much the whole gamut there.
You've also done some in situ remediation too, right, Shaun? You've done some injections, right. And I think you've sampled all the media. I know the folks are out sampling wetlands and sediments and
Yeah.
low tide and high tide, and I think we did even some tree sampling at one time to see if contaminants had nutrients had been, I guess, absorbed into the trees and vegetation. So kind of neat stuff all over.
That's right. We try to really take a hard look at new technologies, because the reality is cleaning up and doing remediation is a pretty costly expense. And so anytime you can accept or try out a new technology that makes us faster in the field or gets us a better picture of what's going on in the subsurface faster, whether that's passive soil gas sampling or colorimetric screening and the like, we implement that, and we feel like we've saved our clients a boatload of money, certainly from the way that investigations used to go in the 80s and the 90s, for sure.
Yeah. Also, I would say too, with your group doing the due diligence, but there's been a lot of hazmat work. Especially on the coast. It's extremely valuable property, exponentially over the last 2 decades. But Charleston, Hilton Head, everybody's very familiar with those. But you go up the coast and it's Georgetown and the Grand Strand. We've worked on some pretty historical properties that sometimes when you work on them, you stop at the middle of the day and go, wow, how old is this? But some pretty valuable things. And when you talk the coast, you're talking about mold. You're talking about lead paint. You're talking about old structures and timbers. And I know Shaun's group has done a lot of work that's made a difference out there for developers. I know they're happy. What I would say too is, what's neat about this area, it's under the south. When I say this area, the Greenville, the upstate of South Carolina, even the southeast, it's growing very fast. But it still essentially has a hometown feel. It's amazing when you go to the airport and you have transfers at different airports. You see a lot of the same folks. And you might not know these people, or sometimes you know them by face because they were in seat 14A and you were in 19D and saw them. And you have conversations with them like your neighbors, and you know them forever because they were going out on a Monday and coming back on a Friday, and you were doing the same thing. And it's just kind of neat how that actually often grows into relationships. I probably have secured 10, 12, dozen jobs just by sitting next to somebody on the phone, or on the plane, and just talking about what they did. And they just had a need, and I had a need, and I was able to solve a problem just by talking to folks. That's definitely part of HRP Southeast history.
How has Greenville changed since you've been down here, obviously, and assuming some listeners here are tuning in from the area there, I can tell you, that there was only a handful of restaurants downtown when I got here. Came down for grad school in 2000. Used to come into Greenville on the weekends, and you basically had a couple of options there. And now, at least from my perspective, I don't even know what restaurants are downtown now, just because of the boom.
And that's really honestly, I think that's an important part about our growth, and I'll explain why. And that's a great point, Shaun. Is 93 when I was here was when they really made a decision as a city to transform and come back. Everybody's got an opinion, but a lot of people would go home after work downtown because there weren't any choices. It was boring, is really what it was. There was not a lot of flashy things. Yeah, people will say there's a lot of other reasons for it, but they slowly started to develop back. But when BMW came and people needed a place to stay and place to eat. And what was been so neat is we now have art festivals, music festivals, nationally known. And there's such an influx of food. This is truly a foodie town, and I'm with Shaun. There's tremendous restaurants, but they're influenced from all over the world. And that's because of all the suppliers and the businesses that were here. And why is that important? Because Greenville is such a happening place. If we hire candidates, often, you go through show them the office, you do your interviews, things like that, but we will always show them downtown. And if we get to the point of showing them downtown or the greater region and see what the growth is, it's a done deal. There's no reason why any folks would not want to come to Greenville to move, to live, to work, to have the work-life balance. You could have a great meal, and you could drive 45 minutes and go on a tremendous hike and see eye candy waterfalls. You can go an hour away and be on the most beautiful, pristine lakes. And if you want to go backpacking and get chased by a bear and do it the old-fashioned way, you're about an hour and 20 minutes from doing that. So it's such a great place to live and work and grow, and people have identified with that.
Yeah, it's not a secret anymore, I'm afraid.
We're the number one weekend getaway, I guess now, or the weekend stay. And I guess with working from home, I guess we're the number one destination for people who want to work from their house and condos and et cetera. And so California, Texas, Midwest, everybody's moving here to work from home and then go out to eat in the clubs and the restaurants and the music scene and the sports scene and the art scene to enjoy it all. So that's what we have around us. It's a pretty bad weather too. The weather's tremendous here. Absolutely tremendous. Even January.
So now that we've kind of covered the work that we do from the Greenville office, I'd love to get to know, and maybe this can be a transition to the play hard section of the podcast, but I'd like to get to know a little bit more about kind of the personality of the office and the personalities within it, kind of the different people that reside in here, and some of your fondest memories of the times you spent here. Your best HRP memories, Greenville HRP memories.
Well, we have quite a cast of characters here. I haven't traveled to all the HRP offices, but we definitely have some colorful folks here. And part of that is the nature with what we do, right? We have engineers and we have hippie geologists and we have scientists. And, I think that the culture, at least from my perspective, trying to pick up the culture that Tad established in his construction of the office and then kind of taking the baton and running with it, was trying to purposefully keep things light, keep things fun as best you can within the confines of what we're doing here, and recognizing that everybody's putting in a lot of hours and a lot of week. And you could put this analogy into any occupation, right? I guess, but just recognizing that you probably spend more time with your coworkers than you do with your family, certainly on a given week. And so, and I think in order to uncover that or understand who you're working alongside, I think it's important to have, fun little things going along the way. Actually, this isn't a plug, but tomorrow we're going to go over across the street and go to a facility that's got go-karts, and we're going to do our 500 race just to get people out and about, in a post-COVID pandemic, trying to get everybody loose here and have lots of fun with that. And, Johnny rubs Shaun into the wall and, all those types of things. We do lots of food drives. We do a lot of philanthropic type events as a measure, not only to benefit our community and support our community is what we do, but you got to understand that if you get somebody outside of the office, that you get to see the true individual, and that's kind of where the trust and the relationships form, is when you can have those external experiences outside of a client deadline or a billing memo or an SOP. And so, I think that every company of any type tries to do that, but I think maybe we do a good job of trying to find the right time to kind of hit the pause button and get everybody kind of refreshed and have a laugh.
Yeah, the chili cook-offs where people, which turns into a stickball baseball game, which it just turns memorable. But the food drives we have, where whoever raises the most food actually ends up getting a pie in their face by the subordinates. And we get the community involved, we get our clients involved, Shaun got our whole business park involved in that, and they got all excited, and we got a whole bunch of additional receipts for that. But some of those memories, when we had the Navy contract, we would go down and work for 10 days straight, but we had a sample at 6 a.m. You got done. I just told this story last week. We get done at 3 p.m, and it'd be 100 degrees in Florida. Well, we went to the beach, and because you wanted to cool off, and it was a great thing. But traveling on those trips and seeing the local culture, I love the time at Christmas and Thanksgiving where we'll have a potluck and everybody will bring their family's recipe and dish. And when you're talking about that from the Southeast, and you get people from Georgia and Tennessee and South Carolina, everybody's got something different, and it's just neat to see what rolls in there. We like to have a barbecue or a cook-off every now and then when we do it, but the cast of characters that have come through here, just incredibly brilliant people, talented people. Even though some people have come, some people have gone from either a spouse transitioning or moving for family reasons or getting a higher level degree and moving on, everybody still stays in contact. How are they doing? How's your kids? We're big on the families. I absolutely love our Christmas party. And everybody's probably got their thoughts thinking about what the Christmas party is. We go bowling. We go bowling with an ugly bowling sweatshirt. We were relaxed. We ate basic food that you had at your high school cafeteria buffet, probably about that quality too, but we love it. But all the kids get gifts, and we have competitions. You get to hold a trophy for the year, and it's just so relaxed, and everybody just stays a long time, and that's been going on for a while. And everybody doesn't want it to change. I think we would have a ruckus if it ever got changed.
We talked about it. I remember my first 2 years here, we used to have a more traditional sit-down dinner, right, at a local establishment. And those were fun. By no means, that got together. But you sit at a table, you're kind of stuck talking to the person in front of you or to the side, and then I don't know what it was. At one point in time, we just said, hey, let's go bowling, kind of in jest or as a joke. And in that kind of setting, you get to meet your colleagues' kids. You get to hear stories about your colleague that they would have never told you. You get to meet somebody's spouse. You get to hear those stories that create the fabric of the individual, and that's just where bonds are made, like that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, and it's just neat to see you and like with anything, by doing those events, you learn a lot of, like Shaun said, about your employees, the incredible people they are, and some people are very humble. You find out someone has been doing Big Brother, Big Sister for years, and you never knew, and the monumental things they do outside of the office. And some of those folks, you're going, when do you find the time? Because you're incredible within the office. And what a lot of folks like to do, and the hardships and things. But it's nice when you have a core group from top to bottom that has stayed together for a while. Sheila Jones has been with me for the last 10, 15 years as the administrative assistant. She's the office mom, aunt, friend, guru, nurse, office aficionado. She kind of keeps everybody down to earth too, and she'll keep you down to earth if you get too big on yourself. She'll let you know on that, but she makes sure everything that's done right. And we all watch out for each other, but we're also hold each other accountable down here. What I like with the cast of characters that we have is it's a special group, and you don't get to come and work here as an honor. We would rather work the extra mile and work harder and overtime. And if you don't want to fit the bill, we kind of don't want you. And we'll tell you that here. It's a little abrupt and a little harsh for some folks, but it's kind of the way it is. But we don't have time to mess around. We don't have time for that, I guess, is the statement people use.
Yeah. I guess one of the things about the culture and who we are, if we're pulling back the curtain here on the Wizard, is one of my favorite things to do. And Tad and I have had a lot of windshield time, okay? Whether that's an airplane windshield or a car windshield. And after we got to know each other a little bit and realized that we were both, still had the mentality of a high school junior, let's say, I really started taking advantage and taking great pride in my ability to come up with new ways to embarrass Tad in an airport. And that took many different forms. And we're in St. Louis doing something, and we're sitting in the airport, as many of the people who are listening to this podcast have done, and your flight gets delayed because there's a little bit of rain in Atlanta and the whole world shuts down. And then, your buddy comes onto the plane because you got seated first, and he just crushes you in the face with a laptop bag, and you listen to the collective, and all you can do is just laugh. But just to take that time out to publicly embarrass him and have him kind of put his head down and grin and just walk towards me like, I wish I could, gut punch you right now. Just kind of it keeps it light.
Yeah, we keep it professional and courteous, so we don't really affect a lot of others. But to take the edge off, it's always good to have a shoe full of whipped cream that greets you when you unpack your bag to start a week's worth of work. That type of thing that remembers you're going to be there. So, yeah, and the whole group is like that. We really are. Even from traveling, I mean, there's certain folks, when we go out and they're like, hey, let's get some sushi. My family doesn't like sushi, and we'll go out and we know when we travel, we're going to go to certain places. And Texas will compare the barbecue. We have barbecue charts from each state because they're all different. And we just have a lot of fun with that, to do that. So there's some great folks that have been here. And a lot of them actually have come back to us and work for us as project employees. They're more of contract workers and stuff because, one, we can count on them A to Z. They're all over the country. Actually, even some have jumped and worked for us and done work in Canada and some other far reaches. And it's been nice because they know the HRP way. And they have a lot of nice things to say about us, even if they have moved on, about their times here that they remembered.
So I think to close this out, what I would really like to have you guys do is just to kind of say what each of you has learned from the other. And I mean, like, what you valued from working with each other and what you've taken into your roles, be it as the regional office manager, as the vice president, or in this case, the president of the company, the COO. Kind of reflect on what you guys have been able to bring into each other's working lives.
That's deep, Tom. What have I learned?
The guy that asks all the tough questions.
I feel like I'm kind of writing your retirement speech here, Tad, where I just roast you. But I think, Tad has, I came to HRP with a good technical base. Certainly I've learned you just by being, you build upon that. Tad has taught me a lot about business and the ropes of consulting. And, he's really good at shaping situations, whether they're internal or external, about trying to look at it from a different point of view. Patience, understanding that there's always other factors in play. He has really helped me become what we call internally as a total consultant, somebody that can not only do something technical, but also, the personal ropes of, taking the phone call after hours, moving mountains or attempting to for a client. The HRP experience, right? The why our clientele continue to do business with us. Those are the types of things that I think that I did not have when I came to HRP, that Mr. Goetcheus has shined a white light on and kind of really helped me become better occupationally at what we do.
And I would say, Shaun, thank you for those comments. I would say, and they were well said because it gave me time to think about you and what I'm about to say. But, with Shaun, I would think, it's the work ethic and the passion that he has for the work that I see directly affect the others that work for him, showing people the right way. And that's natural for him because he's a former athlete, not a golfer, but he's actually, he's a catcher. He's played other sports and things like that. And it's made myself and the other executive management team a little bit sharper. I mean, we really can rely on him, but being sharper, and it just popped in my head, almost makes me feel like Wally Pipp. And the fact that if I take a day off, this guy Lou Gehrig is going to come in and replace me for 20 years. But that's okay, and that's what the cool thing is that's okay. So it's the work ethic that he shows, really not just for this office, but on other levels, both inside and outside the community, and the stuff that he's doing now outside of the office as far as charitable things and the passion that he has for not only his family, being a great father and husband and son, doing a lot of things, but his nonprofit work is pretty tremendous what he does. I don't know how he finds the time But he does. But then I also remember he's 12 years younger than me, so maybe I had that time or the effort. Now I go to bed at 10:30 now, so maybe he stays up later. So, but that's pretty neat. That's what I take from him as the example of kind of what's right in the world.
Thanks, man. You want to hug it out?
I got hungry during this talk, like talking about restaurants.
Guys, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Tom. Always a good chance to sit down and chat.
Thanks so much for joining us, everybody. This episode of 312 was hosted by me, Tom Simmons, produced by me as well, with technical assistance from Everett Anderson. Our guests today were Regional Office Managers Shaun, Malin, and President and COO Ted Goetcheus. 312 is a production of HRP Associates, Inc. If you like this podcast, make sure to subscribe, rate us 5 stars on Apple. It really helps us out. And remember, as always, stay safe out there.